Hello everyone, my name is Martin Meyer and welcome to the second part of this webinar where we will discuss a creation of an asset or a scene for advertising or a VFX shot. So in the first part we had a look at the creation of the actual asset, we modeled the logo and we created textures for it inside of Mari and we modeled it inside of MODO. And in this part we will have a look at how we can furnish the scene and build the scene using MODO's replicators. We will use also sculpting and we'll texture it procedurally inside of MODO. When we are done, we will render it all in channels and we will create all the AOVs necessary for the actual compositing inside of Nuke. And we will finish the scene inside of Nuke where we'll add the sky, glows and all the sort of secret and special sauce that makes shots pretty. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Okay, so let's have a look at what we'll be actually creating. So we will have this river or the valley where the river flows, some sort of rocks or mountains around it, and the mountains in the back, in the very background, will be added in Nuke, and there will be a photo, and also the sky will be added as a post inside of Nuke later on. So also I would like to create some mesh, some geometry that will allow me to scatter some trees on top of these surfaces, here, here and here. So we'll have a look at the way we can use replicators to scatter those pieces of the environment. So let's start creating the valley right now inside of MODO. So I'll just jump to MODO and let's do some modeling. Okay. So here we have our previous model, and this is where what we arrived to. So the scene, I mean, I made lots of rocks and they're very high res because I subdivided them. So currently I'm at 7 million polygon. So to keep it easy and quickly flowing, I took my all rocks and I just ran mesh reduction on them. You can find mesh reduction under the mesh edit. Actually, pardon me, a polygon, and here a reduction tool, and then you can specify how many polygons you would like to have. So this is much easier to work around and won't slow down the scene, and eventually we will merge them together with the master scene. So here I can start modeling my environment. So I'll just go ahead and save this as into my MODO scene and call it Enviro 001. And I don't want to save it as OBJ, so let's quickly oversave this again as Luxology scene. So good. So now I'll create a new mesh by pressing N, and let's call this ground. And this mesh will hold the main surface. So if you look at the sketch, the river kind of starts here and then goes in this loop kind of shape or noose kind of shape, and it kind of disappears back. So I would like to create a plateau, and in the middle there is this valley. So let's go back to MODO, and in my ground layer I'll quickly draw out from the top view maybe fairly big square with the cube tool or the plane tool, and I'll just reset it on Z and give it sort of equal size of 401 meters. It's about right. Let's look at where we actually drew it. So it's on the ground. Our F or our logo is sitting on it. I'll just move it a little bit so it touches, and then let's cut this up so we can create the shape. I'll just go ahead and save it by pressing Ctrl S and then look at it from a top view. And I'll go to my mesh edit and grab my slice tool. Let's start cutting this up. So provided I'm in a polygon mode. And actually, pardon me, I will grab a edge slice and let's just start clicking. Let's just start a little lower, and I'll start creating the shape sort of from top view. Now if you have the cut inside of polygons enabled, MODO will allow you to slice the polygon anywhere you like it. So let's just go around and make something that's similar to what we had in the sketch. Cool. So now I'll just go ahead and select this and press B for a bevel and extrude this, or extrude this, bevel this with maybe with 0 cuts, so I have a nice strip top down. This is, again, it can be modeled in many ways. I could have just created this patch and then extrude this way, but I think this will do. One thing that I would like to do though at this point is to slice my view by pressing this little handle in the viewport and pressing Ctrl and dragging to the side of the slice, or to the direction of the slice. And here I would like to start looking through my camera that I'm actually going to go to the master scene and still from. So we are aligned, and I can see what actually and how the environment is actually flowing. This can be also detached, and you can just keep it sort of small on the side as a reference view, and that's generally how I like to work. Just keep it all visual, so I really see what I'm doing. Maybe let's adjust this width a little bit, just to change how this is, or how far this spreads, and maybe this should go also somewhere here. And of course we can change this at any point, even later. So now I have my basic shape created. I can clean up some of the geometry so we can actually get nice subdivisions, because we'll rely heavily on the subdivision surfaces and actually subdivide the geometry to get us the shape that we want. Now I would like this little dot or the circle to be on the other side of the riverbank, so let's move this over here, kind of like that, and let's clean this up so it's not overlapping too much. Good, so this is I guess good for now, and I can now grab this loop, just pressing L, and let's hit B for bevel, click in the viewport and then drag it down a little bit, and then grab this red handle, and that will give me the ability to, let's move this thing away, that will give me the ability to inset it a little bit, so it's actually looking nice. So if I now press Shift Tab, you'll get really crazy subdivisions. This is because none of this is none of these surfaces, these are really two huge n-gons. So let's fix this. I tend to use generally I tend to use my edge slice with the multi-slice option, and let's try to create as quadratic surface as we can. So I'll just go around here and clean this up a little bit, so we have something that is much easier to sculpt on and work with a little later. So to cut surfaces inside of MODO, you press just the C, enable the multi-slice, and then as you can see, when I'm going through this edge, it will actually slice through all of that. And then when I subdivide, not everything will be good, but you see that that flows quite nicely in there. So let's just cut this over here, and this one this way. I'm not too worried about the topology, but in general, I try to keep it even and consistent throughout. So I will actually slice this up once it's cut all the way. So let's go and finish this up quickly, at least this part, and Then I'm going to pause the video and finish the other side really quickly. One thing that I would like to point out is that if you would like to re-engage the tool, you don't always have to just press the tool and run it. MODO has this really handy way of rerunning. I'll move this thing around here and just keep on working on the shape of the river as I go. Also, these need to be cut this way, and perhaps this way as well, and constantly checking how this actually performs, how it subdivides, if it is actually working. So this time I will go through here like so, and maybe even here would be a good slice opportunity. Perhaps even here, and then I'll just add another. Now we will also, this is just the base geometry for further refinement, so I can just cut this up a few times. Bill sculpt heavily on this, so some of these imperfections and areas where the detail disappears is not as important. Here we have a nice little glitch that I created, so two vertices are separated. You can really easily fix it by going to the vertex tool and just join or joint averaged, and it will merge those two. Vertices really quickly. So I'm starting to be sort of happy with this. Let's just move this around right here. Maybe this one will go all the way here, and this will curve a little more, so let's just pull it over here, and this will go somewhere here, so we can actually see bits of the river and play with the shape as long, at the moment I arrive to something that I like, I will just keep it that way. So another important bit, it seems like I'm actually missing a cut right here, so that's easy to fix. I'll just go to this edge and press Alt-C. I will cut it all the way up to the closest angle, and then run my edge slice and just fix that slice there. So just go here, have a look. So last thing that I would like to do in this section is just quickly select the bottom loop like so, and press the bevel tool one more time, inset it a little bit, and maybe like so, and create the actual river in there. So these are river banks, or will be the river banks, and here I'm getting some weird geometry, so let's just fix that. So the same thing is happening as well here. So with middle mouse button you can actually select through, and I think I'm done with this, so let's just kind of fast forward a little bit and finish the surface, and then we can continue sculpting on this. So I'll just hit save, and let's open up a finished version of this part. Okay, so here we have our finished surface, and now when I pressed Shift Tab, you'll see that this will give us much better resolution. It's mostly quads. One thing that I failed to mention is that if I go to Mesh Edit and you are doing your slices with the loop slice, I can re-engage the tool, so very easily, so that can speed up the workflow. So for example, if I want to cut here, I can just click, but instead of running the tool again, I can press Shift and then run the tool without ever exiting the tool itself. So click again with Shift and continue slicing the meshes like that. Really handy way of doing this. So also, if you would like to equalize the surface a little bit, you can use the smooth tool or the sculpting tools. So I can just bring them up 3 or going to my paint tool or paint tab, and here I can grab my smooth and then grab the brush and just go around and equalize the surface a little bit, so the slices are not as uneven, which makes the sculpting later on easier. Great, so now let's actually move on to the sculpting bit a little bit. So I'll just save this again, and I will create myself a copy of this. So let's just duplicate this mesh and hide the original. So this is how I keep the track of, and I'll call this ground 1. And this is how I keep track of progress, or so I can always go back and make changes. So just go ahead, press Shift D for the subdivide polygons, and I'll subdivide them with Cut-Mole Clark, or you can even subdivide them faceted, just to get more resolution into the mesh, depending on what you need. So now let's break it up a little bit with the push tool. I just like to use these tools initially because they don't sculpt in the multi-resolution subdivision surfaces. They just protrude the actual geometry, and you can see that I'm already getting some nice and bumpy results here. I will press the Ctrl to push down and move this whole back section a little lower, so it kind of hides. It will make the compositing easier. And then let's start breaking up this surface a little more. So here I will smooth a little bit. I will smooth the riverbanks, so we get a nice transition with Shift and any tools, any sculpting tool selected. You can really quickly smooth this out. I like to just smooth the whole area, whatever I'm working with. Now, of course, I'm just focusing on the areas that that are actually visible. Good, so let's save this, and let's create the actual water surface in there really quickly. But maybe I'll break this up before that just a little bit, move this down, move it back, just so we get some, as many imperfections as possible. In this case, I think that helps a lot to sell the idea. Okay, so I'll just press N for a new mesh, call this water. And one thing that I would like to see though is that the meshes, the selected and unselected meshes, should be the same. So by pressing O or going to the options of each viewport, you can change that. So if I press O and go to my inactive meshes, which is the ones that are not selected, I can just say make them the same as active, and now everything will be nice and obvious and visual. Okay, so let's go to my sculpting tools actually, pardon me, modeling tools. I'll just go to the model tab, and I'll draw out a new surface into the water layer. So I'll just quickly draw out a square. In this case, we don't have to be all that precise. So here I have just a square that roughly matches the other square, and let's give it a shader so we can see where it nicely intersects, where it intersects with the other one. So I'll press M and call this water, and give it a blue color, so it's really so I can really see where the river intersects. And let's just move it down so it's at the bottom of this whole valley, like so. Good. So one thing that I see is that this is possibly stretching too far, so we can just go to my, again, paint tab and grab my sculpting tools. In this case, I'll grab the move tool, and again, I'm still moving the actual polygons themselves, so I can just change this a little bit, maybe move this here a bit, change practically everything about this, maybe make this riverbank a little a little sharper and adjust the river so we see how it goes away into distance. I would like to make this area a little wider as well, so let's move these sections as well. So, and once I have this general shape, again, this is all adjustable at any point. Once I have this general shape kind of tweaked, maybe I can move this up a little bit to again break up the flatness of this and keep on massaging the whole surface. But when I have the general shape established, I will do a little bit of sculpting on this to give it a little more detail. And another thing that I realized is that I think I made my whole surface a little too big. So just go to the top view and I'll select this loop, press the shift, and I'll just delete that loop and double click this and erase the stuff that's not visible, so I don't have to deal with that, and all the geometry that is not necessary I tend to erase. Good, so that shape seems to be working pretty fine. I'll just go ahead quickly to the render view and check how it looks rendered. This will be very rough, but it's sort of happening, as you can see. So I'll jump back to my paint and start the sculpting process. Now, we won't get through the whole sculpting process. I'll just we'll show you the most important bits to start sculpting. So first of all, I would like to turn on the multi-resolution. I know that I will need much more subdivisions, or many more subdivisions in there, and I'm just gonna start quickly sculpting on this and breaking up all the bits and pieces, and perhaps even more. MODO is set to only work with up to a certain level, but you can change this in the OpenGL preferences. I don't really need to do that, but so here we go, and I keep on adding detail to these surfaces. Control will erase or sculpt, carve, and regular left click will allow you to add the volume. Another really interesting bit that you can do is enable different nozzles. So here I have my smooth nozzle. So for example, I will grab a procedural brush, which is a noise, and then start working with that, and that will immediately start adding some interesting detail to the rock faces and to the whole surfaces, which might really help, especially down here where I need to quickly break up the surfaces. Good. So you can spend a few hours on this, quickly adding detail based on whatever level you need to arrive to. But now when I try to render that, you'll see that immediately I will have something that looks a little more like a river. One thing that I noticed in my sketch, or I wanted to add from my sketch, is I would like to sculpt in sort of a little island in here. So let's just start sculpting on that surface, and let's bring in some island-like structures into this. So I'm not touching the water, I'm just creating little breakups into that. So with control I can go back and carve it back. Another really handy brush that I'm using often is the attenuate brush, which allows you to erase the sculpting detail down to the original mesh, but smoothly and progressively. So here I can go also with my flatten brush really quickly and chip away big chunks of the surface. And this one is excellent for rocks and natural surfaces that are made out of something like rocks. So let's quickly have a look at what we have in the render view. and then I'll start applying some of the textures to this. So preview, and this is already starting to look much better. Of course, there is no lighting yet. So let's move on to the texturing part of this a little quicker, or a little more. So before we move on to the texturing, one thing that we need to do is create a nice UVs. So let's really quickly create the UVs. I'll just zoom out on this. Because these original UVs came from the cube, so there is a lot of overlap. Very quickly and very easily fixable inside of MODO. I can just click the surface, grab my unwrap tool, and click OK. And here I have something that's way more suitable for what I'm doing. There is also so this is and then maybe just let's make it a little more humanly understandable. So rather than having it rotated like that, I'll just rotate it slightly like this and pack it to the square. So now this is, I guess, good enough. Again, we'll be doing the shading procedurally, and there will be lots of noises and procedural textures, so it doesn't really matter that much, but I would like to have the UVs available if I need them throughout the process. So this is good for now. And actually, one last thing that we can do to the UVs to improve the general shape is this new rectangle tool, which I can just run on the UV surface, and it will nicely lay out rectangular surfaces like this. So it's just more neat. And now if I pack this, I will get even better use of my texture space. Great, so now I have UVs, and let's do the textures. Great, so I opened up a scene where I have it slightly more sculpted, the terrain, and as you can see, this is just a lot of, I'll just go to the paint tool, or paint tab. This is just a lot of carving. Let's just grab the carve brush and maybe let's simulate what I've done for the rest of the pieces. I just select the mesh first though, and let's just carve in there quickly, just breaking it up. This is already 6 million polygon mesh, but it handles itself quite nicely. And once I had the grooves, then I just went around and flattened the areas to give it kind of chipped appearance. Now this doesn't really require that much detail, because most of the detail will come from the displacement mapping, which will be done procedurally inside of MODO. So let's have a look at the shading of the scene that was set up for this after the sculpting to simulate the rock. So once I have the surface sculpted, I started preparing various displacements. So I'll just turn them off and quickly go through them as I started creating them. So I enabled this displacement layer. MODO has this really neat organization feature that allows you to quickly set any kind of group. This is just a simple group to a desired shading effect, like for example displacement, and anything that I put inside of the group will be treated as displacement. So first layer that I have is just this noise base, which looks like this. It's a simple noise that distributes or breaks up the surface for the first time, or the first level. Then I added another noise, which is this is fairly wide. Then I added another noise that is much smaller and finer in detail. So if you look at this, you'll see that this one covers majority of the surface, and it also has a directionality to it. That's because the texture locator of that noise is rotated, so this creates kind of like the sediment layers. So together the displacement looks like this when I turn off the current map overlay. There is another level of noise on top of this that really quickly breaks up the surface even more, and it's just even finer grain, I guess. And the next thing that I added is a little bit of cracking through the surface. So see, like this one actually covers the whole surface. So the next thing I added are these worm veins that break up the surface even more, and they create, I'll just give MODO a second to update, and they, just on the overlay, they create these little cracks on the surface all around the place, as you can see. And another, the last layer of the displacement is another worm vein that creates really large cracks. So this one was scaled to a really, really big. As you can see, these cracks are coming from that particular layer because it's really huge. It's 20 meters and it's 100 meters and 20 meters, and it's scaling all around. So if I turn off the current layer overlay, you'll see that these cracks are created by that last noise. So I have a surface. It nicely broke up the ground, and I have some directionality, some flat areas, some really noisy areas. Just for comparison, I will disable the displacement again. This is our sculpted level. This is the one with displacement on top. And once I had this, then I proceeded to use occlusions to take advantage of the fact that we have a displaced surface in there. So I think I will go just with a simple, just disable these occlusions so you can see what they're doing individually, and I'll enable the diffuse layer. So the first occlusion in there, if I turn it on, just MODO give a second to update. Samples concavity, these are the deeper areas, and it multiplies on top of the base color, which is this yellowish hue on the material itself right here. So if I enable that, this will sample the concavity, and will give me, it will darken all the grooves in the surface, as you can see. Lovely stuff. So it spans across 5 meters. The next that I have there is a downslope, which is again multiplied, and it's green, and this gives an appearance of water damage a little bit. The next occlusion that I'm using is convexity, which will pick up the raised areas, and it will brighten them. So if I look at the current layer overlay, you'll see that all the higher parts of the surface are receiving slightly brighter color. To exaggerate that, I'll just maybe put this to 100. I will see that it will pick up all the nice detail in the displacement map. And because we have displacement map, we can do that. So then I'm breaking up the reflection of this rock just a little bit with the noise, and the last bit that goes on top of this is a crackle texture that kind of breaks up the surface into larger groups, as if they were made out of big chunks of rocks. So if you look at this one, you'll see that these are like pieces of rock. Simulates that effect, and it's just being added, and it's one of the enhanced methods, I believe, organic, and I found it under the crackle right here. So you can add it from there. So now let's look at the result what we have right now before we continue. So the last bit, I took the gradient texture, and I used I sampled the parameters, the surface parameters, and that is slope, and you can sample slope undisplaced or displaced. In this case I'm sampling undisplaced, and that adds a layer of grass or moss on the areas that require or that are facing the y-axis. So you'll see that on the flat areas I'll end up having a little bit of green hue to kind of simulate the grass in distance on top of this. I'm using undisplaced because the displacement breaks up the surface a lot, and it would sample every single little bump on the surface. So this is my shading just done by just few occlusion nodes and one single color on the material, which is really handy way of doing this inside of MODO. And the water is really simple shader, which is using just a blue, slightly blue shader with a little bit of reflectivity. and I'm setting the refractive index to that of water, and absorption distance is set to 20 millimeters, which takes care of, I'll just zoom into this area, of this nice fade out of the surfaces underwater. So if I set this to something higher, you'll see that you'll see the bottom, and of course there is a little bit of refraction roughness to blur out the water under the surface. So let's go back to 10 millimeters or 500 millimeters, I believe I had there. 50 maybe. So I think at this point I am fairly happy with this, and I can continue, just add a few replicated rocks around this area, and also on some trees and some additional little detail before we go ahead and render this for Nuke. Okay, so the first replicated system that I would like to create are the rocks that are scattered around the riverbanks in these areas, and they also to simulate this sort of erosion effect, you know, as if the rocks were falling down to the river. So we made some rocks. They are part of the F, so we can reuse those, and the reduced geometry compared to the high-res one will be a perfect. You know, we can harvest this and reuse it in the setup. So the first thing that I'll do is I'll just go ahead and hit unmerge meshes, and that will break apart this geometry, and I already did that here, so you can see all our rocks here. They're just hidden, and the other thing that I did, I'll just show them. I had the pre-made replicators. So if I show them here, you'll see that those are the rocks on top of each other. The only thing I did is then I went to the center, to bounding box center, and that will give or put the pivot of each of the rocks in the center of the rock. So when they align with the replicator, they will not float above the surface. So with the rocks selected, I can create, I'll just hide these two. I can create a new replicator. So I'll start from scratch, hidden here. So the first building block that we'll need is a surface particle generator. And that is the object that scatters points on a surfaces. And this requires my ground object as an input, so I already have it right here. You can just drag and drop it into the schematic, but I already have it here, so you can just disconnect that, move it over here, and connect this. So that will create particles in a certain area. Now here they are. This is all of them clumped together, and the issue with this is that these particles are very close to each other. So let's scatter them like 1 meter apart instead of 100 millimeters. And now you can see that the whole surface, or nearly the whole surface, will be covered. The reason for this is that the particle ceiling is a little too low. But still, we don't need the particles to be everywhere. We need them to be only in the river. So we can control it. You can control the particle distribution in MODO in many ways. You can use the texture maps with the texture-based generators, but with this one I will use vertex maps because we have a nice geometry to do that. There is enough detail. So I'm just gonna go ahead and select the river loops right here, one, and then let's shift L for loop, and then these two, and shift L for loop, and then I will go with shift and up arrow. I will expand my selection like so. Maybe up to here, and then under the lists I can create a new weight map. So let's call this a river. As you can see, this will be the river. And if I go to my vertex maps, you can enable the vertex maps. Since I do have the vertex maps enabled in the visibility, right here is the setting, show weight maps on the active meshes. That will show me the vertex maps, and as you can see that the red is 100%, and it nicely fades off towards the tops of the walls, clip walls. Good. So now I can tell my replicator or my surface particle generator to use this map. So my density map will be my river. As you can see now, the particles will be created only in the river valley. Okay, so we have that. And the other thing is that I would like them to control the size as well. So we'll get big rocks at the bottom, and then they will slowly fade out in size towards the top of the walls. So let's use river as well. So the next thing that you will need is a replicator. We can just go ahead, add replicator. But I already have one created, and also I did drag some of the rocks, just some into the schematic, like so. With the middle mouse button I can just add some rocks. And then a handy way of adding multiple objects to a replicator is just by shift selecting this little diamond on the selected objects, and you can drag them into the prototypes. So now I have quite a few prototypes, and it will randomly choose between them. So if I connect my newly created replicator or surface particle generator into the replicator, and I actually make it visible in the schematic, so here we go, you'll see that I'll get rocks scattered in the river valley. One important thing is that if you don't want to have the replicators visible in the viewport options, because that might generate millions of polygons, and sometimes that might be just too much. So keep the replicator setting on 1. I'm pressing O to bring up the viewport preferences, or you can find them right under this little gear icon. So obvious problem is that, pardon me, is that our replicas are too big, or the boxes are too big. Luckily, you can always scale the rocks, the actual objects down, like so. But the easier way would be just select the surface particle generator and change the scale factor. So I can say, let's say 50% of scale, and that's still too much. So let's go with like 5 maybe. That is possibly a little too small. I already have one of them that worked. So what did I use there? Was 10%. Let's just add that to our newly created one. Aside from that, you can prune the rocks in many interesting ways, but on the replicator rocks, I'm actually using the render density of 80 and display density of 50. So if I set this to 80, this is the actual number of rocks that we'll be rendering. Good, so I'll show my ladder, and let's have a look what we have there in the render view. Let's preview this to get a feel for the general distribution of the rocks and the surfaces. So let's give MODO a moment to process the displacement and the rocks, and here you have it. I think they're still a little too big, so I'll just go and adjust the size. But this will do for the additional detail on the river banks, and in some areas it really creates really nice distribution. MODO updates really quickly, and this looks already much better. If I zoom into this section, this is just the preview displacement of the rock, and this will be also blurry, but I think it helps to sell the idea in some areas. Good, so now we have our little rocks, and let's create some of the foliage really quickly, so we can take this to Nuke. Okay, so the foliage will go sort of in the areas where the water touches the rock at the bottom right here. So for that, I would like to quickly go ahead and create a new vertex map, and I'm gonna use foliage from the Xfrog libraries that you can purchase from our website. There is quite a few. These are the presets. So I just picked some colorful shrubs and some other bushes that I can use. There is really plenty of trees you can choose, but you can use really any kind of foliage, any kind of presets from anywhere really. So here I have them inside of MODO, and the only thing I did, I imported them by double clicking. You can double click on any of these icons, they will show up in the scene, but I don't want them to clutter my scene. They have quite a few shaders, so I created proxies for these. And let me just quickly show you the process. So I'll create a new scene, bring up my preset browser. Let's pick a tree or pick a bush. It shows up in the scene, all nice and lovely, and then I just go ahead and say convert to proxy, and this will save out external, let's just say bush 4 maybe, and that will save out external scene, and the only thing that will be represented in the main scene is the bush itself. So let's go back to the master scene, and I'll bring the one that I just created. Let's go to browse, pick my bush 4, and I'll choose to show me in the preview the final render item. And just to keep it neatly organized, I can give it a name so I know which one is that referring to. Yeah, so let's just move this aside, and there it is. There is the other bush right there. Good, but I already have this in the scene, so let's get rid of it. And now let's create the vertex map that I would like to use to scatter these. So I just turn off the rendering. And let's select my ground and find the area where I would like them to appear. So that would be, and also the water, so we see where it contacts. So I would like this to be in this general area. So let's select that loop right there, and maybe also well, let's select the loop on the other side as well, like so. And then let's expand this. This will be enough. I think this is where I want them to show up. And then let's go to vertex maps, create a new one, and call this bushes. And that will give me nice. Let's just turn them on in the active meshes, showed weight maps, and or let's look at the vertex map right here. And here you can see that this is where the bushes will be distributed. So under the setup, I'll just quickly go ahead and create a similar setup that we had before. So let's just go to items, create a new surface particle generator. Here we go. Ground will be my surface source. I will get the same result as before, so let's set this to, let's say, 1 meter. 1 meter. Also, I would like them to be at least 1 meter apart, let's say. And the other thing that I will do, I will actually set up the bushes to be my density map, so they will only grow wherever this shows up. So another bit that we need is the replicator. Replicator right here, and I will use the surface generator for my prototypes, particle source, and my 3 proxies as the prototype sources. So here we go, there is quite a few bushes. So now we can scale them down on the replicator itself. I just set this to 50, and then I can go to the render and see what we are getting. So let's have a look at the setup. I did turn off the lights before just to keep it light, so let's so looking good. Obviously there's still way too big for this, so we can go to like 20%. And really, I would like just a little hints of some growth around the areas where the water touches the ground. Okay. Okay, so what I have there kind of works, except there is too many of the yellow ones. So we can just find the yellow one is the first one that I made, and I'll disconnect it from from the setup, and now I will get just these. So the other thing we need to do is randomize the scale. So let's just randomize the scale on this, and also I will randomize the rotation on y-axis, so they spin around and you get random little growth on those surfaces. Good. So this is just to help. I mean, this is very far. We're looking at it from a distance. So I just want some of the growth in there. Maybe let's decrease the distance, so I will get some overlap. But I think I'm happy with the general distribution for at least these little bushes. So let's set this to 20 centimeters. Let's give it a moment to update, and let's see what we will get. Of course, if you spend a little more time on the setup, I would actually probably deselect some of the yeasts that are growing inside of the water, but from distance this actually looks pretty good. Let's say the water level rised for some reason. Good, so now let's turn on my low resolution logo, and we'll use that as a basis for the bigger trees that should be growing on top of this with the second replicator, or the last replicator in the scene. Okay, so the last replicator in the scene is generating these little trees on top of growing on top of the logo, and it's using pretty much exactly the same setup, but let me just quickly take you through it. So I'll just make this a little smaller. I'm using the low-res geometry of the logo as the source. On top of it is a surface particle generator, and all of that goes into a replicator that is replicating 3 trees that are creating exactly as the bushes. So to modulate the growth, I'm using a vertex map here. So if I select the logo and look at the vertex maps and select that one, here I have my growth map, and let's just go to a perspective so you can have a look at that. Here is the growth map that I just created by selecting few faces and then adding a value to that. So for example, if I want to add some trees to this section, I just select this and press Shift W and dial in the amount of trees that should be growing in that given area. Good, and the last thing that I did is I made the low-res version of the logo not renderable. So that can be accomplished just by selecting it and say do not render. So it will render the replicators, but it won't render the actual low-res geometry, the placeholder geometry, which is good because it's light for display and creating the vertex maps. But I would like the high-res logo that we created in the previous iteration of the webinar to be used. So I'll just pause this, quickly enable my water and my ground, and let's have a look at what we have at this point, and I'll merge the scenes and we'll render them in a moment. So let MODO create the displacement maps and all the geometry that I have in there. And this is what we have now. It's displaying the low-res or preview displacement maps because I had the draft displacements on. Let's enable the high quality so we can actually have a look at this real quick. Here we go, and let it clear up a little more. Good. So this is our environment. I'm fairly happy with it at this point. Now we can merge the scenes very easily and render it out. So I brought those two scenes together, and this is the result. We still have our low-res logo generating the trees, the background, everything on the ground is being nicely prepared, and I went ahead with preparing the render setup. So I'm gonna be rendering at sort of HD resolution. I will have my GI enabled with 1 bounce, and I guess the most important bit, I added some additional passes or AOVs channels to the whole setup. So I added depth map that will allow us to do the fog and also a little bit of depth of field. Ambient occlusion, which allows me to just pick up some of the additional detail, and mats or alpha channels, AOV, alpha ID passes, pardon me, for all the shaders in here. So we have the ground, we have the water, and so on. So for example, they're all available here. For example, I can look at the ground mat. This samples only the ground, the water. Ambient occlusion, we can adjust a little bit before we render. Let's say I will give it like a 10-meter range, so it really picks up only certain areas. And we are ready to start processing. The last thing that I'm going to do after this updates, I'm gonna go ahead and look at my final color, find my environment shader right here. This is the one that's being displayed, and I'm going to disable it from the camera, so it will still affect my scene and it will still affect the lighting, but it won't render, so I can replace it with some nice photographic sky inside of Nuke. Good. So let's just give it a moment to reload and recreate all the geometry so we can have a look at the way this looks. The scene is fairly heavy at this point, but we have lots of little detail in there. It should hold up even on higher resolutions that what I'm rendering it at. And as you can see, the ground or the sky disappeared. And I'll stop this and go ahead and hit render or F9. So MODO went ahead and rendered the image. This is highly sped up. The full render took actually around an hour, but I actually rendered it at 3K, I believe 3K resolution. And we had almost 700 million polygons. That includes the displaced geometry and the trees and all the bushes and rocks. So a lot of detail for this, but and now we have it and we can take it to Nuke. Great. So here we are in Nuke, and I started bringing our renders in just by using the R or creating the render node. Or read node, sorry. You can also bring in the inputs just by dragging and dropping them. So here are all our inputs. I'll just grab, for example, the ambient occlusion and drag and drop it like this. And then if I press 1, it will be displayed in the viewer, or it will automatically connect to the viewer. So I did some adjustments to kind of beautify this to my liking. There are many ways of doing this. There is always many ways to skin the cat inside of Nuke, but this is what I did. So first thing that I did, I multiplied the ambient occlusion. So I took the final color, which looks like this, and the ambient occlusion that we rendered that looks like this, and I multiplied it on top of the image. So if I disable that completely, this is the result. If I enable it completely, this is the result. So we'll just drag it down a little bit. So then I started adding some hue corrections on the saturations just to bring up a little bit of the greens and yellows in the rocks, to kind of make the image livelier, I guess. And I tinted it all towards red because this is supposed to be sort of a semi-deserty scene. Another thing that I added, I shuffled in the Z information. So here I have my Z depth render, and if you look at the values, now this is 32-bit image. If I scan through the image, there is a lot of information in there, even though it looks white. If I really stop it down, you'll see that some of that stuff will start showing through. So I added that into the stream, so now we have actually the depth data in there. So let's look at the RGBA again. Another thing that I did, I graded this information. So I took a regular grade node and I started playing with this till it started looking sort of like this. And this is the mask that will create my fog, distance fog, and also some of the saturation adjustments. So I took this and used it as a mask for my saturation that desaturated the very distant area based on the mask. And also I added some of the bluish background or constant on top of this. I just add it as an over. So this essentially creates the distance fog, as you can see. Many ways of doing this. I did it this way. Then I took one of these great background images or images from Jacek Pilarski. They're freely available online, so you can just download one. And I moved it around to fit my background, so I added that behind my screen. And also I added this roto paint that just, if I disable this, it's a simple rectangle that if I just play with this, that kind of adds some of the contact glow, or I guess. So if I add that behind, you'll see that that merges this way. And since I merged my Z depth into the stream right here with the shuffle copy, now I have it available to do some defocusing. I kind of wanted to go with the tilt shift camera look, so I added some of the depth of field based on, just zoom in this a little bit, some of the depth of field in the foreground and in the background. So the Z defocus can be set up in a very efficient way inside of Nuke. The way I tend to do that, I'll just drag the focal point to a place where I would like this to be focused. And you can also look at the layer setup, which will show you which areas are actually going to be kept in focus. So the green is sharp, blue and red are out of focus. So I can play with the depth of field area that will give me, you know, wider or narrower depth of field. So maybe only this section needs to stay in focus. And then I can look back at the result, and you can see that this is already starting to go out of focus more. And you can play also with the size and amount just to get the look that you want. So quite efficient way of doing that. Maybe let's undo this. Once I was happy with the or one of the possible ways the depth can look, I added a little bit of glow. So just a little bit of glow, a little tinted glow, based on a tolerance. So only the brighter areas will start glowing, and also some of the orangey stuff. Then I added lens tool and vignette. Both of these are available on Nukepedia, so you can just go to Nukepedia, nukepedia.com, and just get some of these great gizmos and sort of plugins and tools that are available for Nuke. So the lens tool adds a little bit of chromatic aberration to these areas, for example, and also it allows you to do lens distortion. So I can just dial something crazy in there. I mean, let's stay within the reasonable numbers. And also blurs the edges of the the image, which can be really easy way to fix or add some little bit of lens-like feel, or as if it was shot through a real lens. The vignette is kind of self-explanatory, it just darkens the edges. Again, this can be done in many ways, but here on this tool I have control over the size and softness and practically everything that applies to the image. I tend to do this blur and sharpen trick at the end of my composites before I add the grain. This just breaks up the digital pixels, so I blur the image up and then sharpen it afterwards. Again, to your taste, I can maybe reduce this a little bit. This just breaks up the digital feel, I guess, a little bit. And then as the last bit, I'm reformatting it back to the original format and adding a little bit of grain. So again, there is many ways to skin the cat, but this is a simple composite how you can really quickly build up and add some additional fine-tuning to your digital images directly inside of Nuke. Doesn't really matter where the renders were created. In this case, I used MODO to create this picture. So there you have it. Hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial or the webinar, the second part of the webinar. And if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat window or just let me know. And hope to see you soon. Cheers!